We've been talking about Andy Burnham. Obviously, he pretty much is leading the news in just about every publication, just about every day on his journey to Downing Street. But he's going to use his first major policy speech next week to lay out plans to devolve more powers to local mayors and to slash Whitehall powers. His argument is that it's going to bring much needed economic growth. I know you've all been texting in about that. Keep them coming, and we will read them out very shortly. Now, here at the Times, we've learned that he is going to say that the South is actually paying the price for economic failure in the North, and actually devolving that responsibility and giving more of that responsibility to the Midlands and the North is actually going to level things out for everyone. Burnham's going to use this speech to commit to spending a significant amount of his premiership in a new number 10 of the North to show his commitment to devolution. Joining us now is Chief Executive of the Northern Powerhouse Group, Henri Murison. Very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, lovely to join you.
Thanks for being here. Look, there's plenty of cynics about, and they would argue that Andy Burnham wants to spend a lot of his time in Manchester, that's where his allegiance and his loyalty lies. What evidence is there that investing in the North, not just Manchester, is going to benefit the whole country?
So the piece in today's Times, I think, lays out a really clear argument, actually, which I think is what we'll probably hear from Andy on Monday, which is that there is a cost of economic failure currently. So at the moment, where I'm sat near Bradford, the health service costs more to run. We pay more in out-of-work benefits. And that's because we've underinvested in capital. Because actually, other articles in the last few days have highlighted that on capital spending, London does still receive more overall than other parts of the country. And so if you want to address the inequalities, you have to invest in those things that drive productivity. And that particularly includes areas like transport, but also innovation, a lot of the activity around the green transition, the sort of decarbonisation of the economy. If you add those things together, they present a huge opportunity to address the structural issues in our economy. And what that means is that people can then pay their own way. Because I don't want people in Bradford to take taxpayers' money from places like London, the South East, because they die younger and they're more likely to be out of work. And much rather we built people in Bradford a new train station so they can get to work, and then they can pay more taxes and contribute to our overall problem, which is that we're not paying enough tax in this country for all the public services we want. And I think Andy is laying out, and is expected to lay out, a very reasonable deal, which is that the long-term benefits to the whole country of becoming less divided and less unequal is significant, and we need to give the power to change those places to the people leading them, because that's the most efficient way to spend whatever money we can afford, whether it's public money and in some cases whether it's private investment and finance, to be able to make the difference we need in those communities.
Just speaking about less division there for a moment, Henri, is this rhetoric of north-south divide and devolution, is that helping, or is it actually just fanning the flames?
I mean, I would say I work really closely with other business groups on this agenda. So with my colleagues through something called the Growing Together Alliance, with Business London, with Cambridge Ahead, with Business West, for example, Business South. And actually, we have a lot of commonality of view, because Greater London could also do with a bit more devolution. London doesn't keep many of the profits it makes as a city region. So the mayoralty of London, Sadiq Khan, doesn't keep enough of the tax raised in London either. And that would enable London to grow more significantly and successfully, because at the moment central government doesn't give enough freedom to London either. So I don't see this as a north-south only issue. I think those like George Osborne, and in particular the person who inspired his thinking on this, Jim O'Neill, who's now advising, I understand, Andy Burnham, this is not a divisive agenda. This is actually about saying that there are some structural issues in the economy, and whether you're a thriving place like Greater London has been and should be again, or somewhere like Manchester that's really pushing, it's got that fastest productivity growth in the country over the last 20 years, real potential to go further, as well as those places that may be a bit further behind, like the Humber Estuary, where there's huge potential. Actually, the same prescription works, whether you're already a more productive place, you're fast becoming a more productive place, or you're not as productive a place. Actually, the same tools, which is more local control and the ability to keep the taxes you raise when you do better, and so can invest more money against those future revenues. And I think Emma Dunkley wrote yesterday in the Times about this. I've written a letter today as well, all supporting this. I don't think Andy's alone, and I don't think it's just Northerners as well. I think a lot of people think that his prescription and what he's done in Greater Manchester could and should work, not just for the rest of the North, but for the whole country.
I mean, the numbers in Greater Manchester are impressive in terms of their economic growth in comparison to other cities around the UK. I understand the argument for it there. But can I offer perhaps a somewhat more sinister view that if you devolve to the extent that Andy Burnham wants to, and if you give all of these places across the UK more control, and yes, you have some places like Manchester who will do very well because of whoever they have in power, but there is a risk, is there not, that actually some places are not going to have the right people in control, they're not going to spend it right, and I'm just thinking down to a very local level here in London, for example, when you have a borough that's mismanaged like Croydon that's been bankrupt 3 times and the people of Croydon are suffering. I mean, isn't there a risk that you're going to have people in certain cities that just can't manage it or don't manage it as well, and then that city suffers?
I think that's a fair challenge, and it's why those like us in the business community are trying to lean in, because we can't let devolution fail anywhere. And I think slightly differently to those councils that went bust or went very close to going bust in the last few years. We also had examples in Essex, including here in the northwest as well, in the north of England. We had councils, so Thurrock and Warrington, other examples where there's been problems. I would take the view that one of the benefits of having these strategic authorities, so the Greater Manchester Combined Authority that Andy Burnham used to run as Metro Mayor, the others across the country, and the Greater London Authority, which Sadiq runs, is another example, because these are essentially a collection in the rest of England of a group of councils together. You are insulated a little bit from the very specific issues that can happen in a particular place. And also the thing about the mayoral model is you aren't, even as an elected mayor, sort of having kind of the power of a king or uncontrolled power. There is no model like that in the UK. It's not quite the same as the US, where cities are much more volatile in terms of their leadership model, because every leader of every council in each combined authority also gets a say. The mayor is kind of first among equals. And so I do think one of the legacies of that George Osborne era that I worked on, and many others did, which also had support, by the way, from Labour politicians in the north of England at the time, over a decade ago, built a model that did actually have some real safeguards to avoid what I think is a very legitimate issue about losing, I think, public money and making long-term decisions that have risk, and that does need to be managed.
Henri, I just want to put 2 things quickly to you before we head off. Number one, what Calum, my co-host, mentioned earlier on is this just levelling up, which was a Conservative policy? Is this just dressed in different clothes? And number 2, what our listeners have put to us this morning is, what about the rest of the country? What about coastal towns? What about Cornwall? What about places that don't fit so neatly into that north-south divide?
I mean, it's a proper nerdy fact, but Cornwall was the first of the places in the Cameron Osborne era to get some form of devolution. It wasn't an elected mayor, but they did get a deal of some kind. And I think my answer to your kind of wider, very legitimate point is, of course, the north-south divide is a very particular example of some of the issues in the country. But it isn't just about the disparity. It's that the north of England, because of its scale, has the opportunity to be a counterweight to London. Because it doesn't matter where you live in the UK, the fact that London, the South East, dominates the economy of the whole country and subsidises everyone else's public services is really unhealthy for our political culture. It's really unhealthy for the way we make decisions, because it means we're hugely over-centralised. And actually, if the North is a counterweight to London, economically and politically, I think that changes the national conversation and actually does benefit you wherever you live. I don't think it's a cynical kind of good for the North, not good for the rest of the country.
Right.
I think changing our political culture is good for everyone.
Good counter, Henri Murison. Worthy opponent. Thank you, sir, for joining us this morning. I appreciate your time.